And I've worked with some very good ones. John Huston is very, very good. I worked with Carol Reed. He's very, very fine. Carol Reed is more concerned with physical imagery. He's got a great sense of style. He's good with actors, but he doesn't spend a great deal of time. He assumes the actor knows his work, and he is more interested in the composition of what he's doing.
It's October 1994, and one of Hollywood's greatest legends is dying. Burt Lancaster, the man who dominated silver screens for 5 decades, is lying in his hospital bed, knowing he has maybe weeks left to live. And he's about to drop the most explosive bombshell in entertainment history. The reporter sitting across from him thinks this is going to be another typical farewell interview. Career highlights, favorite memories, maybe some gentle Hollywood gossip. But Lancaster's first words stop him cold. "I need to tell you about the singers. The ones everyone thinks they know. Because I've been carrying their secrets for 50 years, and I can't take them to my grave." See, what most people don't understand about Burt Lancaster is that he wasn't just an actor. He was Hollywood's conscience. While other stars were playing politics and kissing up to studio heads, Lancaster was the guy who called out racism, who fought for fair treatment of crew members, who stood up to bullies. He was respected by everyone in the industry because he couldn't be bought, couldn't be intimidated, and wouldn't play games. But that reputation came with a price. People talked to Lancaster. They confessed things to him. They told him secrets that would destroy careers and shatter the public's faith in their heroes. And for decades, Lancaster kept those secrets because he believed in giving people chances to change, chances to do better. Now, with death approaching, Lancaster realizes that some of those people never changed. They just got better at hiding. "You have to understand," Lancaster tells the reporter, his voice still commanding even from that hospital bed. "The public sees these singers as entertainers, as artists. But I worked with them. I watched them behind the scenes. I saw what they did when the cameras stopped rolling and the audiences went home." Lancaster pauses, gathering his strength, and drops the first bomb. Frank Sinatra wasn't just difficult to work with. He was a predator, and everyone knew it. Lancaster had seen it all. He'd been on movie sets where these singers treated backup musicians like dirt. He'd witnessed the racist rants, the sexual harassment, the financial exploitation. He'd watched careers destroyed, not by lack of talent, but by refusing to play along with these singers' sick games. Why wait until now? Why not speak out earlier when it could have made a difference? Lancaster's answer cuts to the heart of how Hollywood really works. "Because nobody would have believed me. And even if they did, nothing would have changed. These singers were worth too much money, had too much power. The studios would have destroyed me and buried the story." He's right, and everyone knows it. In the 1950s and 60s, the entertainment industry was an even tighter boys' club than it is today. Stars like Sinatra didn't just have money. They had connections to politicians, to crime families, to media moguls who could make problems disappear. "But now I'm dying," Lancaster says with a bitter smile. "And dead men can't be sued for libel." Lancaster looks directly at the reporter and delivers the line that would haunt Hollywood for decades. "I'm going to name names. I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw, exactly what these so-called American treasures really did. And when I'm done, you'll never listen to their music the same way again." The man who had spent his career playing heroes was about to expose the villains hiding in plain sight. America's golden voices were about to be revealed as something much darker. And Burt Lancaster, with nothing left to lose, was finally ready to tell the truth. Lancaster takes a deep breath and delivers the words that would shatter America's image of its most beloved crooner. "Frank Sinatra was the most dangerous man I ever worked with in Hollywood. And I worked with some real monsters." The reporter shifts uncomfortably, probably thinking about Sinatra's army of lawyers, his connections to organized crime, his legendary temper. But Lancaster is past caring about any of that now. "People think they know about Sinatra's mob connections," Lancaster continues. "The gambling debts, the favors, the muscle. That's kid stuff compared to what he really did. Frank used his power to destroy people, and I watched him do it with a smile on his face. Lancaster's voice gets harder as he recalls a specific incident from the set of From Here to Eternity in 1953. There was this young backup singer, couldn't have been more than 19. Beautiful voice, beautiful girl. She was there to record some background vocals for the soundtrack. Sinatra took one look at her and decided he had to have her.
What happened next, according to Lancaster, was a masterclass in how predators operate when they have unlimited power. Sinatra didn't just make advances. He made promises, recording contracts, movie roles, introductions to the right people. All she had to do was spend some private time with him. When she refused, Lancaster says, his voice filled with disgust, Frank made sure she never worked in this town again. Not just with him, with anybody. He had that kind of reach. But it gets worse. Lancaster reveals that Sinatra didn't just destroy her career, he actively spread lies about her character, her professionalism, her talent. Within 6 months, a promising young singer was waiting tables in some dive bar outside Los Angeles, her dreams completely shattered. And the sick part, Lancaster continues, was that Frank bragged about it. He told people she needed to learn her place, like he was teaching her some kind of lesson. Lancaster witnessed this pattern repeat itself dozens of times over the years. Young singers, songwriters, even established performers who crossed Sinatra in some way, they all faced the same systematic destruction. And it wasn't just Sinatra doing it alone. The Rat Pack wasn't just a group of friends having fun, Lancaster explains. It was an enforcement network. Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, they all played their parts in keeping Frank's secrets and carrying out his revenge. Lancaster describes how they would coordinate their attacks. If Sinatra wanted someone blacklisted, Dean Martin would refuse to work with them. Sammy Davis Jr. would spread rumors in the jazz community. Peter Lawford would use his Hollywood connections to make sure certain doors stayed closed. They called it loyalty, Lancaster says with bitter irony. But what it really was a criminal conspiracy. The most chilling revelation comes when Lancaster talks about a specific incident he witnessed firsthand. During the filming of a movie in Las Vegas, Sinatra became obsessed with a young cocktail waitress who was also trying to make it as a singer. When she rejected his advances, Sinatra had her fired from her day job. When she still wouldn't give in, he had his mob connections make sure she couldn't find work anywhere in Nevada. I watched this girl go from hopeful to desperate to broken in the span of 3 weeks, Lancaster recalls, and Frank would point her out to people, laughing about how she'd learned not to say no to him. But perhaps the most damning accusation Lancaster makes is about Sinatra's systematic targeting of African-American performers. Despite his public support for civil rights and his friendship with Sammy Davis Jr., Lancaster claims Sinatra used racial slurs regularly and actively worked to keep black singers from getting the recognition they deserved. Frank would steal arrangements from black musicians, claim them as his own, then make sure the original artists never got credit or compensation, Lancaster reveals. He'd have his people spread stories about how these musicians were unreliable, unprofessional, whatever it took to keep them from getting work with major labels. Lancaster's voice breaks slightly as he continues. The worst part was watching Sammy go along with it. Frank had such a hold over him that Sammy would actually help destroy other black performers just to stay in Frank's good graces. The systematic nature of Sinatra's cruelty becomes clear as Lancaster describes the network of enablers that made it all possible. Record executives, club owners, radio DJs, music critics. They all knew what was happening, and they all stayed quiet because crossing Sinatra meant career suicide. Frank didn't just hurt individuals, Lancaster concludes. He corrupted an entire industry. He turned music, which should have been about bringing joy to people, into a weapon for destroying lives. And this, Lancaster warns, was just the beginning. Sinatra had taught other singers how the game was played, and they were eager students. Lancaster leans forward, his eyes blazing with an anger that seems to give him strength despite his failing body. You think Sinatra was bad? At least he didn't pretend to be something else.
The ones that really make me sick are the singers who built their careers on being America's sweethearts while they were monsters behind closed doors. The first name out of his mouth stops the reporter cold. Doris Day. I know what you're thinking, Lancaster continues before the reporter can object. Sweet Doris Day, the girl next door, America's virgin. That's exactly what she wanted you to think while she was destroying the lives of every black backup singer who worked with her. Lancaster's voice turns ice cold as he describes what he witnessed during the recording of several movie soundtracks in the late 1950s. Day, according to Lancaster, would routinely humiliate African-American singers during recording sessions, making them redo takes over and over while using racial slurs that would make a Klansman blush. She had this sweet voice when the microphones were on, Lancaster recalls. But the moment they stopped recording, she'd turn into the most vicious racist I ever encountered. She'd tell black singers they were lucky to be in the same room as her, that they should be grateful for whatever scraps she threw them. But Day's cruelty wasn't limited to racism. Lancaster reveals that she systematically sabotaged other female singers who she perceived as competition. Young women would come to work with her, thinking they were getting the opportunity of a lifetime, only to find themselves blacklisted from the industry within months. Doris had this technique, Lancaster explains. She'd befriend young singers, gain their trust, get them to confide in her about their personal lives. Then she'd use that information to destroy them, spread rumors about their morals, their work ethic, whatever would stick. Lancaster's voice gets even harder as he moves to his next target, Perry Como. The man whose smooth, easygoing style made him seem like everyone's favorite uncle was, according to Lancaster, one of the most financially predatory performers in the business. Perry had a scam going that was pure genius in its cruelty, Lancaster reveals. He'd hire backup singers, mostly young kids desperate for a break, and promise them regular work and fair pay. Then he'd work them for months, making them sign contracts they didn't understand, before revealing that they'd actually been working for free the entire time. The contracts, Lancaster explains, were written in such a way that the singer's pay was contingent on record sales reaching certain levels. Como and his managers would manipulate the numbers to ensure those levels were never met, leaving young performers with nothing after months of work. I watched kids lose their apartments, their cars, everything, because they trusted Perry Como, Lancaster says, his voice shaking with rage, and Perry would just shrug and say it was business. These were kids barely out of high school, and he was stealing their labor like some kind of plantation owner. But perhaps the most shocking revelation comes when Lancaster talks about the systematic psychological torture that these wholesome singers inflicted on their competitors. He describes a coordinated campaign against a young jazz singer in the early 1960s who was gaining critical acclaim and threatening to challenge the established order. They didn't just try to hurt her career, Lancaster explains. They tried to drive her to suicide. According to Lancaster, a group of established singers, he names Day, Como, and several others, worked together to isolate this young performer completely. They spread rumors about her mental health, her drug use, her promiscuity. They had their people call club owners and record executives, warning them that she was unstable and unreliable. Within 6 months, this girl went from being the next big thing to being unable to get a booking at the smallest club in the worst part of town, Lancaster recalls. She started drinking heavily, developed a real drug problem, and eventually had a complete breakdown. The most chilling part of Lancaster's account is how these singers would celebrate their victories. He describes industry parties where they would openly mock their victims, joking about how easy it was to destroy careers and lives. They treated it like a game, Lancaster says with disgust. They'd keep score of whose career they'd ruined that year. They'd place bets on how long it would take to drive someone out of the business.
Lancaster reserves his harshest words for the enablers, the agents, managers, and executives who not only knew what was happening, but actively participated in the destruction. These wholesome singers couldn't have done it alone, he explains. They needed an army of accomplices,
People who would spread their lies, enforce their blacklists, and cover up their crimes. And they found plenty of people willing to do it. The systematic nature of the abuse becomes clear as Lancaster describes how new singers were inducted into this culture of cruelty. Young performers who wanted to succeed learned that destroying others wasn't just acceptable, it was expected. They turned the music industry into a war zone, Lancaster concludes, where survival meant becoming a monster. Lancaster's voice drops to almost a whisper, and the reporter has to lean in to hear what comes next. You want to know why I waited until now to tell this story? Because the moment I started talking about doing this interview, they came for me. Even on his deathbed, even with nothing left to lose, Lancaster reveals that Hollywood's power structure was still trying to silence him. Phone calls in the middle of the night, visits from old friends who suggested he should focus on his legacy instead of dragging up old controversies. Lawyers representing unnamed clients who made vague threats about lawsuits and reputation destruction. 3 weeks ago, someone broke into my house, Lancaster continues, his voice gaining strength from anger. Nothing was stolen, but every file cabinet was searched, every drawer gone through. The message was clear. We know where you live, we know what you have, and we can get to you anytime. But the intimidation campaign went deeper than simple threats. Lancaster describes how his own agent suddenly stopped returning his calls. His publicist dropped him with no explanation. Even some of his oldest friends in the industry began distancing themselves, afraid of being associated with whatever Lancaster was planning to reveal. That's when I knew I was onto something big, Lancaster says with a bitter laugh. When people who've known you for 40 years suddenly act like you're radioactive, you know you're threatening something important. The most chilling revelation comes when Lancaster talks about what happened to other people who tried to speak out over the years. He mentions 3 specific cases: a backup singer, a music journalist, and a former record executive, who all attempted to expose the truth about these beloved performers. The backup singer died in a car accident 2 weeks after she started talking to reporters, Lancaster reveals. Single car crash on a straight road in broad daylight. The journalist had a heart attack at 34 with no history of heart problems. The record executive just disappeared one day, left his house, never came back. Lancaster is careful not to make direct accusations, but his meaning is unmistakable. The entertainment industry has ways of dealing with people who threaten its most valuable assets, and those methods aren't always legal or ethical. I'm not saying these people were murdered, Lancaster clarifies. I'm just saying they all had one thing in common. They were about to expose secrets that certain powerful people wanted to keep buried. But Lancaster's most urgent warning isn't about the past. It's about the present. He reveals that the patterns of abuse, exploitation, and silencing that he witnessed in Hollywood's golden age haven't disappeared. They've just evolved with the times. The names change, the methods get more sophisticated. But it's the same game, Lancaster explains. Young artists are still being exploited, still being silenced, still being destroyed by people in power who know they can get away with it. Lancaster points to the continuing influence of the entertainment industry's old guard, many of whom learned their tactics from the very singers he's been exposing. The culture of silence, the protection of predators, the systematic destruction of anyone who threatens to tell the truth. It's all still happening. Every time you hear about some young performer having a breakdown or losing their way, ask yourself what really happened, Lancaster urges. Ask yourself who benefits from their destruction and who has the power to make it happen. As his strength begins to fade, Lancaster delivers his final, most important message. I spent 50 years keeping other people's secrets, and it nearly destroyed me.
I watched innocent people get crushed while monsters got standing ovations. I told myself I was protecting the industry, protecting people's careers, protecting some greater good. His voice breaks as he continues. But what I was really protecting was a system that destroys anyone who threatens it. And that system is still out there, still operating, still destroying lives. Lancaster looks directly at the reporter one last time. I'm telling you this story not just to settle old scores or clear my conscience. I'm telling you because someone needs to warn people about what's still happening. The golden age of Hollywood music wasn't golden for everyone. It was built on the broken dreams and destroyed lives of people who dared to challenge the wrong singers. With his final breath of energy, Lancaster delivers his ultimate warning. They're still out there. They're still destroying people. And they're counting on everyone staying silent, just like I did for 50 years. 2 weeks later, Burt Lancaster was dead. But his words lived on, a final testimony from Hollywood's conscience. Lancaster died knowing he'd finally told the truth. What other Hollywood secrets are still buried? Which modern stars are following the same playbook? Drop your theories below, and if this opened your eyes to the entertainment industry's dark reality, subscribe for more shocking revelations they don't want exposed.